top story of the day. The Court of Appeal judges have deemed that the Rwanda plan is unlawful. It was voted 2 against 1, basically. So one person said it could go ahead, 2 of the other judges deemed not. This has divided opinion, the response to this, Ben, because a few people are now saying it's time for the government just to accept it's not going to work, sack it off and progress in a different direction. The flip side of that would be people like me that say, pack it in with this legal system, just push ahead regardless and deal with the consequences afterwards. What do you make to it all?
Well, I've been critical of the Rwanda plan from the minute it was revealed. And the reason I've been critical of it is because it was fraught, I thought it would be fraught with legal problems, not just domestically, but also with a European Court of Human Rights. And we saw that when they tried to take their first plane load of deportees to Kigali. You know, all, I think, 199 of them, bar 1, were removed by British courts, and then the last one was removed by a European Court of Human Rights ruling. But it's also extremely expensive. We discovered that the other day, £170,000 cost per head, you know, and if this is meant to act as a deterrent to more people crossing from France to the United Kingdom, what it had to be was an efficient, slick deportation mechanism that got lots of people off British soil efficiently, quickly to Rwanda. It was never going to achieve that, even if it got over all the legal hurdles. And the problem with our government's policy on border control is that it tries to see it through a policy on deportation. Deportation is actually what you do when border control has failed. So the government's actually given up entirely. We have an unenforced eastern border between ourselves and France. And I don't know if I've got 30 seconds more. Have I got 30 seconds more?
Well, you can in a sec. Let me bring Michael in, then we'll come back. Michael, what do you make to it?
Well, I mean, I think what you're suggesting is to leave the European Convention on Human Rights, because that's what it would mean to sort of push forward with this, regardless of what any judge says.
No, in the first instance. So I would come on to that perhaps as a secondary thought, but my primary thought would be let's just get a plane load out there, deal with the consequences later, whatever consequences there may be.
Well, I suppose what the judges have said in this instance is that that would be a breach of the European Convention on Human Rights.
And what?
Well, and what? It's a good question, right? So the European Convention on Human Rights was agreed in the 1950s. It was pushed by political leaders after the Second World War because they didn't want to see a repeat of the kind of human rights abuses we saw in Europe then. Winston Churchill was one of the main pushers. This was never a Remainer plot.
But the world's changed massively since then.
The world has changed massively since then, but it has still provided an underpinning for protecting our rights, the right for association, the right for freedom of speech. And I suppose I would say if we're going to move away from what has been a core plank of international law, there should be a very, very good reason. And if we look at the numbers of people who are arriving in Britain claiming asylum, it's not that many, right? So the UK, there were 75,000 people who claimed asylum here last year. In France, it was 130,000 last year. In Germany, it was 200,000 last year.
But I don't care about France and Germany because I don't live there. I care about the UK.
OK, you care about the UK. But what I'm saying is, well, I mean, to be honest, I don't necessarily think that is a particularly helpful way of looking at the world. I think we do need to have some sort of international responsibility to our partners. But I think it would be a shame if the UK goes it alone, like Greece did in the 1960s when they had a military coup, and like Russia did when they invaded Ukraine. These are the only two countries who've left the Convention.
That's a little bit extreme, referencing it. Oh, you've got a military coup there, you've got this war there.
But this isn't about asylum seekers. This is about people entering the United Kingdom illegally. It's not about trying to reduce the number of people seeking asylum in the UK by sending them to Rwanda. This is by making it known that if you seek to enter the United Kingdom illegally, and you do so, you will not be given asylum. You will be sent to Rwanda. And that's what the new illegal migration bill is all about. And I think this latest ruling, by the way, I don't think it has anything to do with the European Convention of Human Rights. This is domestic British law that has ruled that Rwanda is not a suitable country to which to send people. And
it's about the safety of how they would treat the asylum seekers. So it's not necessarily, is Rwanda a safe place for you to go on your holiday to, as I'm interpreting what they're saying. It's more about
whether their rights can be assured.
How would they treat the people that are asylum seekers? Would they let those people down and send them back to where they could be persecuted and all the rest of it?
But my point is much more fundamental than the approach taken by the government, which is that if someone's seeking to enter your country illegally, you have to stop them at the point of entry. And we have all the legal right to do that. It's settled international law that people must not be allowed. And
as if by magic.
So I asked your producer to kindly put this up, and he consented, which was very good of him. This is Article 33 of the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea. This is an established international law that all members of the UN have bought into. And it says, in a zone contiguous to its territorial sea, described as a contiguous zone, so that's a zone of water just outside your territorial water, the coastal state, in this case the United Kingdom, may exercise the control necessary to prevent infringement of its immigration laws and regulations. We have the right to stop the boats as they seek to enter our territorial water and require them to go back to France.
Right, so how would we do that then?
Well, we have to have a trained force with appropriate equipment, appropriate boats, to intercept these boats, and instead of providing a taxi service, stop them and require them to go back to France. It's simple as that.
Let's roll
Refuse entry.
So what does this mean then? So there's this dinghy full of people on the channel. The border force boat rocks up, says to them with a megaphone, whatever, right, you're not going back to England. They're going to tip themselves out of these dinghies to create an international, to create a water rescue. What then?
Well, you
rescue them.
You don't rescue them. You push out another dinghy to them and you say, climb into that dinghy and go back to France. That's the last dinghy you get. You can have any number of solutions.
But they won't do that.
You can have any number of solutions, Michelle. You could have a boat registered outside. The key here is not to allow them onto a British boat, because the minute they're on a British boat, they get protected by exactly the kinds of human rights laws and everything else that we are now struggling with in our courts. What they have to know is that they will not be allowed to get that protection.
Do you think that's fair?
Well, so just to go back to a previous point, I mean, it was mentioned in the court ruling that what this would breach is Article 3 of the European Convention on Human Rights. Why I brought up Greece and Russia is they're the only two countries who've left it so far. So while they might seem like extreme examples, they would be the only other two people in the group of people who'd left.
But why does
European
that matter?
Convention. Why does it matter? Well, I think it makes our country look pretty poor if
we have... To who?
To who? Well, to the global community, and I suppose
why
to myself,
why do we care what the global community think?
Well, because I do think that, I mean, let's go back to when this convention was written up and why it was written up, was because we had seen in Europe, I mean, the Holocaust for a start, we'd seen millions of people exterminated, we'd seen such awful breaches of human rights that we decided that probably as a global community, we do need to come together and decide a few ground rules, right? To say, we can't just say, I'm all right, Jack, what's happening on my island is okay.
Well, actually, the ECHR was in many ways conceived to control Germany. For, you know, what Germany did during World War II.
Well, I mean, as much of the EU was, right? So much of the EU was to say, let's integrate France and Germany so they can never go to war again. But what I think we'd be on dangerous territory if we say, it doesn't matter what any other country thinks about us. It doesn't matter about human rights. I'm all right, Jack, we just do our own thing. That's how you end up getting lumped in groups with Vladimir Putin in Russia and a military dictatorship in Greece in the 1960s.
For me, the primary concern is not our international reputation. The primary concern to me is sovereignty in this country, so actually that this country have the final say in what we do and don't have and what we do and don't want and all the rest of it. So for me, that's a core principle. Sovereignty is here in this country. Secondly, to Ben's point, this is not about saying, you know, if you are genuinely in risk of being persecuted or tortured or whatever, then we're not going to help you, because I don't think like that at all. I think, for example, the people in Afghanistan that we're trying to help, I think we should have helped more of them, actually, those people that helped us in Afghanistan. I think it's shameful that we haven't helped more of those people. So genuine asylum seekers that are in danger, of course we would help. But this isn't about that. This is about an abusive system and us being powerless to stop it.
Well, I mean, it is about saying that, I'm afraid to say. So the reason the courts have made this decision today is because they've said, well, for one, it's very important to recognise that if you are an asylum seeker from most countries, there is no way to get to Britain other than irregularly. So
no, that's not
there
right.
aren't legal routes.
There are legal routes.
There are only legal routes from Ukraine and then Afghanistan, although we haven't let anyone through that for
other programmes
6 to 12 months. But if you're from Iran, if you're from Iraq, where lots of these people are from, you can't. And the reason
Michael, they're coming from France. They're not coming from any of these war-torn countries. They're safe.
I have two problems with this argument. One, which is I think we should probably all accept that there is a right for refugees to seek asylum, and we as countries in the international community should take our fair share.
No.
Now, France is already taking...
I don't understand what does a fair share mean?
What a fair share means, I think, that you're taking migrants somewhere in proportion.
But why should we take any migrants?
Well, why should we take it? Because if we don't take any, why should anyone else take any?
Why should they? Why should anyone take an economic migrant?
Well, Well, these aren't... So
they are. The minute they're in France coming to the UK, they're economic migrants.
That's not how these laws work, right? So you can be an asylum seeker and you can claim asylum...
But that's true, they're safe in France.
Well, they're not subject to persecution as they would be in Iraq or Iran or wherever they came from. But this is not how... That doesn't make someone an economic migrant.
But
so we have international laws for this.
Purely economic motivations.
It doesn't make...
And they're breaking the law to get here.
You have a right as a asylum seeker to seek asylum wherever you want. It's not illegal to do that. That's established in international law.
It is illegal to cross the channel without papers.
It's important that that would be the case, because otherwise what we'd be saying is the millions of people who left Syria during the Syrian civil war would say, you should all go stay in Greece. And if you say you should all go stay in Greece, then that's going to be a bit of a problem for Greece, isn't it? So I think we have a problem with, we say, we're lucky enough to be an island. We're not directly bordering any war-torn country. Therefore, the people who should take all of these asylum seekers are the countries who are neighbouring those war-torn countries. Now, that is us not taking our responsibility. And if I was in one of those countries that was next to one of those war-torn countries, I would be saying, why aren't you taking your fair share? We can't just say, we're lucky enough to be an island, so we're not going to take anyone.
A fair share is such an emotive term without having any definition.
OK, well,
what is a fair share?
So you could say a fair share. You could say that all the people who want to come to Europe, we will divide them up according to per capita who lives in a country. So you say every country in Europe has a responsibility to take a number of refugees proportionate to their population.
Well, do you share that view at home? I think it's a bit bonkers, quite frankly, but I'll open it up to you guys. All views welcome.